Today on Lightning Bugs.
I believe that the great thing about drag is there is no box. There are no rules. There's no wrong way to do drag and there's no right way to do drag because everybody is so different in how they do it. You know, it's the same as like every comedian is, you know, hopefully has different jokes or whatever, or every musician has different, you know, you can have similarities. And
I've got two jokes, but yeah.
Yeah, but you can have like similarities and similar genres. But what's great is like there's no definition, there's no rules. Drag is for everyone. There's no box to put it in. And drag has been around for a long time. You know, the first kind of known drag queen or drag artist in America was actually a former slave, the name of William Dorsey Swan, who would have these like kind of underground speakeasies for queer people at a time when, you know, it was illegal to be queer. It was illegal to wear women's clothing or men's clothing if you were, and it was illegal to be Black. You know, so you had this person who was putting themselves out there to give people this kind of underground space. And I encourage everybody to look them up. William Dorsey Swan.
Hi, if you're enjoying listening to Lightning Bugs, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It helps a lot. Today's guest is the iconic New York City drag artist, TV personality, and political figure, Marti Gould Cummings. Marti has been a regular fixture in the nightlife world for nearly a decade. They host shows such as Dragged and The Marti Report, and they have a podcast called Marti Talks. Marti serves on the board of directors for the Ollie Forney Center, the Advisory Board of Equality New York, the New York City Nightlife Advisory Council, and much more. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Marti Gould Cummings. 1, 2. I have read that your early aspirations were for musical theater and Broadway. Is this true, or is this Wikipedia nonsense?
No, it's true. I feel like I have that like typical like queer kid story. You know, I grew up on a farm and I didn't fit in, and you know, and I remember, so it's a kind of like two-part, right? Like, one, I went to the local community theater, which is in a town called Churchill that doesn't even have a stoplight in it. And they had the local community theater. And my cousins took me when I was really, really young to see the musical Annie. And I could not believe people my size were on stage doing all this stuff that I would like do in my living room or out in the cornfield. And I was so mesmerized by it. And I went home and told my mom that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I was probably like 5. I was like, that's what I want. I want to do that all the time. And my aunt, my mom's sister, her and her family lived in Tarrytown, which is right outside of New York City. And so when I was really little, I grew up in Maryland. So when I was little, we would come up to visit, and we would always come into the city, and my mom and my aunt, you know, my dad would say, oh, you know, that what you want to do, this is where it happens. So as I got older, I was introduced to theater more broadly from the Rosie O'Donnell show. And I was obsessed with Rosie O'Donnell. I was obsessed with her show. And so when most kids were like, oh, I want to go to the Bronx Zoo, or I want to go to the Empire State Building, I was like, I want to find out where Rosie is. So I wanted to be a musical theater. I mean, that's a long answer to your question. Yeah, so I moved to New York when I was 17, 2 weeks after graduating high school, to study musical theater. And then I got cast in this off-Broadway show that introduced me to drag. And then I like accidentally became a drag queen.
Yeah. So many of those things line up with me. I mean, I grew up in the South. It was a lot of construction workers, a world that wasn't my thing. And as soon as I saw music, that's what I wanted to do. And at some point I went to New York, and I actually pursued musical theater for a while too. And did
really?
Yeah. I was in a sort of Oh, I don't know what you can't call those off Broadway. It's when it's just in Connecticut. Connecticut Dinner Theater. I did Buddy Holly, Buddy in like I don't know 1902 or something like that. Yeah.
Oh, that's so awesome. Well, I just love I love music. I love musical theater. And I love that it was a way for me as like a kid, really, when I started doing shows like in this little theater and now I've since gone back in drag and done shows at this theater to raise money for the theater and taken, Broadway friends of mine down to raise money. And it's been really full circle and beautiful. And, but it was such an escape because, I think I'm not unique I'm not like terminally unique in being a kid who was like picked on for being different. So many of us go through that experience of feeling othered or not fitting in and going into that fantasy world of like escapism through the arts. And so musical theater was such a way for me to just like, find peace through that chaos.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
it's I don't know. I think it's so, yeah, I mean, you get this. Like, I think the arts are just so important.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that, for kids, I don't know if you call it escapism, but it seems that way for when you're a kid. It's like, that's my world. As soon as you get home from school or as soon as you can find a moment to just go off into your own world. And the thing is that world actually exists or existed in New York. And so you went there. Do you see a path now to doing musical theater at this point for you, or are you diverging?
I mean, I always try, this is such like a, corny kind of answer, I guess, but I really, my life is so interesting in the sense that like everything's kind of just happened by accident because the universe kept hitting me over the head and I'd have to kind of listen to it, and so like when I, came to New York to study musical theater, that's what I really thought I was going to do for the rest of my life. And I got cast in this show that introduced me to this other art form within that art form that became my career. And I said, oh, this is really fun. It's not only performing and singing and being on a stage every night, but it's also helping me come to terms with my own gender identity and who I am as a non-binary person and helping me accept and feel comfortable with that. And then, through drag, that led me into politics with Occupy Wall Street a bazillion years ago and connecting me with political action. But I'll listen to the universe and whatever that's supposed to be. Drag will always be a part of my life. Musical theater will always be a part of my life. We're doing a Broadway for Marty Phone Bank tomorrow, so it's always going to be a part of my life. But I think it's okay. I feel like I used to really like everything was like compartmental, like it has to be like this and it has to go like this. And then when I allowed myself to just say, you know what, this keeps like coming up. Maybe I should listen to whatever the forces are saying and just explore this. So right now I'm exploring using these art forms to engage people politically and roll with it and see what happens.
Well, I mean, there is such a, when we're kids, it's a lot of what do you want to do when you grow up, and then once you grow up, whatever that means, at some point, I think we all, especially in the arts, realize, you're calling it the universe. It's like something is dictating almost half of your decisions. This is what's available. I mean, I'm podcasting and making songs over podcast. I mean, that's not what I was doing before. Now I'm doing 100 things, and I think it's good for people to see that and understand is that we're all sort of jacks of many trades, and you just kind of go with it. But if it led there, you'd be open to being like Marti Gould Cummings on Broadway, and that's what you're doing.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting that you say that. I had a meeting with the freelancers union earlier today, and we were talking about that very thing of, like, well, what should we be telling our kids in school? Because freelancers now make up, so much of the workforce in our city and our country. Freelancers being musicians, restaurant workers, graphic designers. I mean, there's so many industries that freelancers fall into,
writers,
right?
Almost
so
all writers. Yeah.
There's so much. So we put so much emphasis on, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be? And we structure kids in schools. Our school system is set up in a way. Our school system now is designed to train kids to have 8-hour, 9-hour work days sitting at a desk. And that was set up at the turn of the century during the Industrial Revolution to train kids for factory work. And we still go by that method of, we're going to sit at a desk for 8 hours and you get a 30-minute lunch break, and that's it. So what we really need to do in our education system is open it up to more creative resources to show kids you have so many options. If you want to go to school to be a doctor, that's great, but you can also explore artistic endeavors, or, if you like building stuff, you can get into that too. Like, we don't have to limit ourselves. There's no limit, and I think so. I think we need to get away from that idea of, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And what the idea of success is, because success isn't always monetary, and we put so much emphasis on that as well.
It doesn't even have to have words. If the first thing you did was go da 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 da, then we'd have a song. Like,
what comes to mind is just sitting here in quarantine worrying about my prostate.
Give me a melody. First melody that comes to mind.
Okay.
It can be one note.
Sitting here in quarantine and thinking about my prostate.
That's good. Sitting here in quarantine.
Is that one of your tunes?
Thinking about my prostate.
No, it sounds like another song, though. Got me another day. Well, it's Saturday night and I ain't got no prostate. That's not it. So let me try another one.
That's good.
Well, isn't it interesting when you put music with something and you're highlighting your version of what you got out of the mood of it. These pictures, that you're supposed to, the psychological test, and, it might be a smiley face, and actually if someone has a personality disorder, they might see it as a frowny face, like they're angry. Or some person sees a movie and thinks it's funny, and the other person sees it and thinks it's sad. What I really like about what you brought out in the music is that Bob and I have talked years worth of bullshit. We used to meet every Monday or Tuesday night and have a scotch or a drink and just talk all night long. And I actually think that music is really appropriate because it's just a little melancholy, which is where I put Bob's song at the end of the day. And it kind of had a little foreboding sound, like it sounded as though something maybe not so good was going to happen. And I think that's the way Bob and I both think. we're optimistic enough, but both of us are just a little bit on the brooding side. If you leave us to our own devices, then when it comes time to go perform, we try to be all happy. So I think you cracked one of the codes in there. And you also brought out a couple of the motifs, which I thought was really cool. Nice work. Yeah. I'm going to play it for Bob. Thank you.
Kind of a theme that I'm getting out of our conversation right now really is being trapped in, like, basically early 20th century boxes of thinking. And that sort of leads me to questions about drag then, because in that way, I think maybe anybody could understand what that art form is about. Because, I mean, I let you explain it. Basically, like, I'm going to sound like Ali G or something. What is drag? Is it cool or is it whack? But how do you define it? And do you see it as having something to do with being a symbol of getting out of an expectation or escaping a box or a definition, as you define it?
The great thing about the art of drag is, and every drag artist might tell you something completely different. Everything I say is from my experience and my viewpoint. But somebody else might tell you something different. But I believe that the great thing about drag is there is no box. There are no rules. There's no wrong way to do drag, and there's no right way to do drag, because everybody is so different in how they do it. And it's the same as like every comedian is, hopefully has different jokes or whatever, or every musician has different, you can have similarities. And
I've got 2 jokes, but yeah.
But you can have like similarities and similar genres, but what's great is like there's no definition, there's no rules. Drag is for everyone. There's no box to put it in, and drag has been around for a long time. The first kind of known drag queen or drag artist in America was actually a former slave, the name of William Dorsey Swan, who would have these like kind of underground speakeasies for queer people at a time when it was illegal to be queer. It was illegal to wear women's clothing or men's clothing if you were, and it was illegal to be Black, So you had this person who was really breaking, putting themselves out there to give people this kind of underground space. And I encourage everybody to look them up. William Dorsey Swan, really, really incredible. And then, you have people like Jose Sarria, who was a drag artist in San Francisco, who in 1961 ran for public office. Years before the Stonewall Uprising, years before Harvey Milk won, they ran for the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco, which is what Harvey Milk would later win after running. And Harvey, I think, ran like 13 times before he won. But Jose ran for this position, didn't win, but went on to use that platform to create the imperial court system, which has raised millions and millions of dollars for LGBTQIA plus organizations. And then, of course, you have, during Stonewall, you have trans women, mainly trans women of color, and drag artists who are really kind of leading the way then. And the gay liberation movement kind of left them behind and whitewashed the movement. And Sylvia Rivera called them out for it, and now, it's really drag has been around for a long time. It's always been rooted in politics and art, not just, it's always been rooted in politics. But I also want to say, I have chosen to use my drag to engage people politically. That might not be for everyone. Some drag artists might just want to, go to the bar and do their gig, and that's okay too.
Well, to back up for a second, how would you I've heard you talking about drag almost in a metaphor, like your drag or I feel like you may define it in a way that I haven't considered and heard before. Like I think you said in a TED Talk, your drag may be this or your drag may be this.
Do you watch my TED Talk?
Yeah, it's great.
Oh, work.
Would you mind sort of defining it as you see it?
So it's that famous RuPaul saying, we're all born naked and the rest is drag. Like RuPaul's very famous for saying that. And I really try to focus on this TED Talk because, I had that unique experience. For those of you who are listening and aren't aware, at this moment where I did Baby Shark with a toddler at my brunch and it became viral. We made a music video. I got all this cyberbullying. Then AOC shared it. So then I had people who didn't like a drag queen with the baby to begin with. Then AOC shared it. Then Monica Lewinsky shared it. So it became this whole thing, like everybody who hates drag queens and AOC and Monica Lewinsky.
You
like,
got all those new fans.
Yeah, it was really, my Twitter was really lit up. So the TED Talk really focused on that kind of motto of like drag is, so I do like drag, right? Like traditional, what you think of drag. But you going out on stage, standing in front of the microphone and singing in front of an audience is your version of drag. Someone, who's a postal worker putting on their uniform and delivering the mail, that can be their version of drag. Or, you're the teacher who's teaching a class that day.
So it's not simply dressing up, but more of the moment that you decide, I'm not naked, what will I be? Then the way that you affect yourself and the way that you create some semblance of a persona is
it's kind of
drag.
that armor also. Like you're presenting yourself to the world. And it's that kind of, I look at my drag as like, I'm so grateful that I went to that audition for that show a bazillion years ago when I was like 19, because it opened me up to this new world. And it really helped me explore, I said I have really bad stage fright, and drag has helped me kind of like tackle that. And it's helped me, I don't know. I mean, it's opened my life to so many possibilities, but you don't have to like put on a wig and lashes to experience that. It's really, and this is again like kind of cliche and corny, but it's really about tapping into like acceptance of self and acceptance of where other people are at. And I've been sober for a long time. I just celebrated 10 years 2 days ago. And one of the greatest sayings in recovery is, does it need to be said by me? Does it need to be said by me right now? Or does it need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? And does it need to be said by me right now? And that's been a great lesson and something that I try to convey in the TED Talk also, and I think now we're at this kind of turning point in our country where like there are opportunities where we need to speak up and use our voices and put on our, figurative drag and get out there.
Do you have what you would consider influences? People ask me that all the time as a piano player, like, who are your influences? Do you have drag influences or a school or lineage of form?
I'm like so grateful that drag is like so mainstream now, and seeing so many of my friends, like the world is being exposed to them now. But for me, it's really like the generation, like one or two generations before me, Sherry Vine, who was like the first drag queen I saw, Peppermint, who's my neighbor, who I love, and Mona Foote, who died of COVID last March, but she retired from drag several years ago, but she was pulled out of retirement to do a Tuesday night like 6 years ago, and then she did Wigstock again, and Lipsinka, and Varla Jean Merman, and Miss Richfield, and Shaquita, who's still working, and somebody who got me, one of my jobs.
Inspiration aside, is there an influence or a particular part of the style, or do you not see it that way?
I love them. They influence my drag so much, because each of them influences a different part of my drag, they each influence a different aspect and a different angle and a different style, you know what I mean?
So that kind of puts you would consider yourself in the fabric to be just a soup of influences. You don't really feel like you come from, like, I definitely don't come through like McCoy Tyner as a piano player. I would love to, but I'm not as good. Like mine comes from like Carole King and stuff.
Yeah, well, it was amazing. I try to just, do my own thing while like pulling references and looking at like I love the history of drag. I love looking at old drag videos. I love when I see a drag artist who's been in the game for like 30 years, doing like take Lip Synco, for example, who's been around for 40 years. And when she did Wigstock a couple years ago, she performed the telephone number that she was famous for back in the 80s. And it was just as good, but like refine and update it to the times. And she was still so sharp with it. And like, you know, and just seeing that just commitment to her craft. And then seeing Mona, who, you know, she had been retired from drag for many years and then came back to do Westgay, this really fun party that used to happen. She came back, and all the people who used to see her back in the early 90s came out to see her. Then you had this whole generation of young kids who had never probably even heard of her being exposed to her, and her sweat was falling, like flying into the audience. And you know what I mean? And it was amazing.
You assume your same name when you do a drag show, right? I mean, I
did that selfishly when I started my drag. So I you know, this is like before I became a politician, when I was like 19 and, you know, when I was like 19 and starting drag, everybody's like, what's your drag name going to be? And I was like, well, RuPaul's real name is RuPaul. And I want to read about myself.
Right.
So,
but they are different people. I assume. I mean, you've created a persona.
I think they used to be very different. And I think they used to be very separate. And now,
interesting.
And now, this doesn't happen with most drag queens. I don't think, again, I'm speaking from my own experience.
Yeah.
They used to be very separate and very different. And I used to be like, this is Marti drag on stage. This is Marti at home.
Mm-hmm.
But now, obviously, when I'm on stage in drag, you know, I am a little more crass and vulgar and, you know, a little more blue and, you know, but it's very, because my political life is so entwined with drag that it's really kind of like, I don't think people bat an eye now when they see me show up like this, or they see me show up in drag. They're just like, oh, okay, you're here.
Yeah,
you know?
I wasn't sure who I was going to get, so that's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, so what you're saying is your, if I can call your drag persona as a persona, someone that you've to an
it's
extent
definitely
created.
A persona, yeah.
Okay, so these two Martys, do you feel they're converging?
I do more so.
Okay.
Recently.
Well, I mean, because that would be, I mean, let's, you know, I know music, so let's look at music. I mean, Nina Simone or Stevie Wonder are good examples. They started off, you know, playing songs about, you know, stuff, and eventually they found themselves both getting more and more political and more them inside their art form.
Yeah,
so
well, I mean, Nina Simone doing Mississippi Goddamn is probably one of the most powerful examples of art and politics coming together.
Well, it is, and it was a discovery because, you know, she was playing jazz standards, and actually she was a classical pianist first. That was her aspiration to begin with. So she went from one thing into that. That seems a fairly inevitable and honorable, honest trajectory for an artist to go, well, I'm going to sing about, you know, Tiptoe Through the Tulips for a while. And then at some point you're sort of like, God damn, you know,
was that a Tiny Tim reference? Is that his song?
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people know who Tiny Tim is anymore, but.
Well, you know, I was going to ask about people like that because like when I was growing up and I was growing up in the 60s, I mean, 70s really, but I remember the 60s. And, you know, it wasn't uncommon to see comedy, straight man dressed up, could be Flip Wilson, later on Dame Edna. And aside from their straightness and aside from their personal, whatever they've said or done, how do you feel about that? Like Dame Edna might be a good example. And this may be somebody you're asked about a lot because I suspect that Barry has said things that would be offensive.
Yeah.
But what about what he was doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, I think drag is for everyone, and everybody is entitled to do drag is for everyone. There's no limitations, right? I think, and I could be wrong about this, like in a historical context. I'm just going from what I have
That's just how
in
you
life.
feel about it. It's all I care about.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times you look at Some Like It Hot and things like that, and it was like kind of like a punchline instead of like an art form, right? So it's more like a punchline, and I think Dame Edna Barry Humphries has done a really interesting job of. It's interesting how back then in like the 80s when he was very big as Dame Edna, it was more acceptable for Dame Edna to become famous than for a queer drag artist to become famous because it wasn't threatening to masculinity or the patriarchal system, because everybody knew this was a straight actor playing this role. Or when you had Robin Williams, who I love, like icon genius, doing Mrs. Doubtfire, or Dustin Hoffman during Tootsie. It was never about drag, if that makes sense. So I think it was a easier pill to swallow for straight audiences. And also Barry Humphries has said a lot of it. I think as Dame Edna, he's very funny. I really enjoy his interviews. I love his Liza Minnelli interview from his talk show. It's very, very funny. And I love when he is on Graham Norton's show. It's very funny. But he has said some things out of drag where I'm like,
well, yeah.
Okay.
And that's why I said, aside from whatever he may have, said that you wouldn't agree with, I was curious on your take of that. And what I get from that is, as you say, drag is for everyone, and so that's part of the acceptance, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I'm not gonna stop someone from doing it. But I think if you're going to do drag, if you're straight, then you should not say transphobic things like Barry Humphries has before. And it, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No. I draw my line. As I get older, is what I'm doing, saying, creating, going to make some kid or a person of any age feel bad about themselves? That's pretty much it. If it's what someone would call politically incorrect, yet I don't feel in any way that is not inclusive, then I use that as my compass. And I would say there is probably, if you see a beer commercial and you've got three big football players with lipstick smeared on their face and wigs, they're like, maybe making someone feel bad about themselves.
Maybe don't make that commercial. Yeah, it's interesting because I'm sure I've said hurtful or inappropriate things in drag as a comedian, but I think the difference is, well, first of all, we're human beings and we all make mistakes, right? So we have to allow people to evolve and grow and learn from those mistakes. If you're somebody who's not willing to listen to the criticism and learn from it and amend it, then that's a problem. But if you say something that is hurtful or whatever, and somebody says, hey, you know what, actually that's pretty offensive, and you take the time to listen, learn, and amend, keep doing that work. But if to do better, it's that famous Maya Angelou saying, when you know better, you do better.
I do wish that in general, the gallery of people online especially would listen to people as they evolve, because I feel like a lot of times you'll see tweets that say things like, this is all you need to know about this person. They said this, that's all you need to know. And I'm thinking, there's a lot you need to know about a person, not just that one little thing. And they may have evolved and I do. How do you deal with?
We're complex creatures.
do you avoid Twitter at this point, or how do you? Where's your garbage can that you put everything that comes your way? How do you do this?
I used to cry about comments a lot.
I still cry about it.
Yeah, I just kind of like, a lot of people love that and think it's wonderful and have a lot of great things to say about it. And a lot of people have a lot of not great things to say about it. And that's okay.
It is okay, because really at the end of the day, if you take all the good stuff to heart, you have to, the valves open, you have to take the bad stuff in. And not that I think you shouldn't listen to people, but I think as a performer and as a public figure, eventually, wouldn't you agree that at some point when someone says you're great, you have to take it with a grain of salt? Because if you don't, when the next person comes in and says you're Satan, you have to.
Yeah, the internet's an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing. It's a wonderful tool, and it also is like the downfall of like, It's interesting. I wrestle. I struggle with it. You know, like, I have to have social media for my career in politics and my career in drag, and both of those careers together. But I also have to practice self-care and not let my ego get fed up in, oh my God, look how many views my video got, or how many not get fed up in ego, and then also not get fed up in like hurt from strangers. It's like twofold, right? Like you said, you have to just kind of take everything with a grain of salt and know that like the people who really matter are, the ones who are here, who I can call and go to lunch with and connect with, and that's what matters.
I like to get an exercise. God damn it, I suck at this job. There's an exercise I like to get from all my guests, it's called New Week's Resolution, and it's what we're all going to do this week. An exercise that we can do to improve our creativity or to improve us as a person, awareness, anything. Do you have anything you could shit out in 2 seconds?
The ways that you're going to help your creativity. I think dancing with your dogs or your pets is really important. Put on music and just be silly for a little bit. I think self-care is so important. So if you want to have that piece of chocolate, just eat the piece of chocolate. It's fine. You're going to be fine. Enjoy it. Get fresh air. Drink lots of water to balance out all the coffee. And be of service to others, but you have to be of service to yourself first. Take care of your emotional, spiritual, mental well-being so you can go into the world to be of service to other people. So whatever that looks like for you, putting on music, reading a book, taking a 15-minute nap, whatever, do those things so you are taking care of yourself. It's been a stressful year. So make sure you're loving yourself through this.
Words of wisdom from Marti Gould Cummings.
Ew.
Cool. All right, let's get out of here.
That was awesome. Thank you so much for having me. You are so nice.
Shit.
You're so nice. Thank you. It's such an honor to meet you and to be a guest on your show. I really
oh no, thanks for making the time. You're doing awesome stuff. So thank you.
I just had my friend Gustavo Rivera, who's a state senator in New York, texted me because I tweeted and he goes, "Oh my God, I love Ben Folds. I can't believe you're doing this podcast." And I'm like, don't you have a budget to work on? Go do that.
Awesome. Well, tell him I said hello and hello to your husband as well.
Listen, check out his album. It's I'm very proud of him. But thank you again, and I'm super grateful for the opportunity. So thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Well, take care of yourself. See you out there.
Bye. Right, bye, everyone.
Hi, if you're enjoying listening to Lightning Bugs, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It helps a lot. Thank you so much for watching Lightning Bugs on YouTube. Check out more episodes and subscribe if you have not already. You can also listen to Lightning Bugs wherever podcasts may be found.